She mistook a millionaire single dad for her $5 blind date. But that mistake changed everything. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. It was supposed to be the cheapest date of her life. Just $5, 1 cup of coffee, and the possibility of awkward small talk with a stranger from an online blind date app. For Emily Carter, a 26-year-old waitress juggling 2 jobs just to make rent, it sounded almost comical. She was exhausted, her shoes were worn thin, and her hair was tied back in a loose ponytail that had already given up on looking polished. But she promised her best friend she would give it a try. After all, how much worse could life get than pulling double shifts at the diner and still checking her bank account twice before buying groceries? Emily pushed open the door of the cozy corner cafe, the kind of place where the smell of roasted coffee beans hit you like a warm blanket. The chalkboard menu boasted overpriced lattes and muffins, but her blind date profile had promised a simple coffee, no pressure. She glanced around, scanning for a nervous man who might look equally out of place. Her eyes landed on a tall man sitting by the window. He wore a plain gray sweater, dark jeans, and had his sleeves rolled up in an absent-minded way. There was no flashy watch, no suit, nothing to suggest wealth or status. Yet there was something in the way he sat straight, confident, as if the world had never managed to weigh him down. He was scrolling on his phone, but when he looked up and met her eyes, there was an ease in his smile that disarmed her instantly. That must be him, Emily muttered under her breath. Without hesitation, she walked over and introduced herself. "Hi, are you Daniel?" she asked, her voice carrying the polite awkwardness of a first meeting. The man looked at her for a second longer than expected, then set his phone down. "Well, hello. I'm not sure I am who you think I am, but why do you not sit down?" His tone was calm, a little amused, as if he were letting her in on a private joke. Emily laughed nervously, pulling out the chair. Blind date apps are ridiculous, right? $5 and they send you to meet a stranger. Honestly, if you turn out to be a serial killer, at least it will have been a cheap mistake. The man chuckled softly, his deep voice carrying an easy warmth. "I promise you, I am not a serial killer." Oh, something about the way he said it, so dry and straightforward, made her grin despite herself. As the minutes ticked by, Emily found herself talking more than she intended. She told him about her endless shifts, about trying to sketch between tables at the diner, about saving every penny for a dream she was not even sure she believed in anymore. To her surprise, he listened intently, leaning in, his eyes holding hers in a way that made her feel seen rather than judged. For a fleeting moment, she forgot she was supposed to be on a forgettable $5 date. She forgot that this was a man she was supposed to meet once, and never again. She felt comfortable. And for someone who had been bracing against the world for years, that comfort felt dangerously rare. But what Emily did not know, what she could not have guessed, was that this man was not her blind date at all. He was not Daniel from the app. He was Daniel Hawthorne, a millionaire entrepreneur and single father who had walked into the cafe that evening only to escape another suffocating business dinner. And now, fate had seated them across from each other, all because of one simple mistake. Emily had not expected to laugh so much. What was supposed to be a $5 blind date with an awkward stranger had turned into a conversation that felt strangely alive. She found herself leaning forward, chin resting lightly on her hand, while the man across from her, this Daniel, spoke with a calm confidence that was impossible to ignore. He asked her questions no one had asked in years. "What do you actually want, Emily? If life stopped demanding so much from you, what would you do?" She blinked, startled by the directness. Most men on cheap dates wanted to talk about themselves, their jobs, or their gym routines. This man looked directly into her eyes and waited for her answer. "I would draw," she confessed quietly, almost embarrassed. "I would paint, design, maybe even illustrate books. But art does not pay the rent, so instead I refill coffee cups at the diner." His expression did not show pity, only interest. You sound like you are good at it. Do you carry a sketchbook with you? Emily laughed nervously, reaching into her worn canvas bag. Actually, yes. I doodle during my breaks. It keeps me sane. She slid the small, battered sketchbook across the table. He flipped it open carefully, turning each page as though it were something fragile and rare. Her drawings were rough, unfinished, but full of life faces of strangers at the diner, a child eating ice cream on the curb, a mother rushing with groceries. Moments of ordinary beauty captured in pencil lines. These are remarkable, he said, looking up at her. His eyes held something steady, something she did not expect. You see people as they are, not as they pretend to be. Her cheeks flushed. Compliments like that were rare. Most people saw her as a waitress who forgot to refill water glasses fast enough. Just then, the server came by to clear their cups. Emily reached for the check instinctively. I have it, she said quickly. This was my idea, after all, my $5 date. But Daniel placed a calm hand over the check. Let me. He a pris le bracelet. No, I insist. It was supposed to be simple, no strings attached. Then let us keep it simple, he replied smoothly. We split it, fair and square. The compromise surprised her. Most men either fought to pay or expected her to. Splitting it felt strangely equal. She nodded, almost impressed. Outside, the evening air was cool. Street lamps flickered as people hurried past, bundled in coats. Emily adjusted her scarf, wondering if she should just say goodnight. But Daniel walked beside her, his stride easy, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. Do you live far? He asked. A few blocks. I usually take the bus. Then allow me to walk you, he said, not as a question but as a quiet assurance. She hesitated, then agreed. The sidewalk stretched ahead, their footsteps echoing in rhythm. As they passed a small bookstore, Emily paused at the window display, her eyes lingering on a set of art supplies, brushes, sketch pads, watercolors she could not afford. Daniel noticed, his gaze following hers. You should buy them, he said. She shook her head. They cost more than my entire grocery budget for the week. He did not press, but the thought clearly stayed with him. When they reached her apartment building, a shabby brick walk-up with peeling paint, Emily turned to him. Thank you, Daniel. For tonight. I know it was not much, but I needed to laugh. It was more than much, he replied quietly. It was real. For a moment, the air seemed to hold something unspoken. She looked at him, wondering why a man who carried himself like that, who listened so deeply, would be sitting in a coffee shop alone. She wondered if he was lonely. She almost asked, but instead, she smiled, said goodnight, and hurried up the worn steps, her heart beating faster than it should after a $5 date. Daniel watched her disappear inside, his expression unreadable. Then he turned and walked away into the night, carrying with him the weight of a secret Emily had no idea existed. The next morning, Emily woke up with the faint memory of last night still tugging at her thoughts. She had not expected a blind date that cost $5 to leave her feeling so unsettled. She made coffee in her tiny apartment kitchen, the kind with a leaky faucet and linoleum floors curling at the edges. As she stirred sugar into her mug, she kept thinking about his words, his steady eyes, the way he had actually looked at her drawings as if they mattered. She tried to push the memory aside, telling herself it was just a fluke, a moment she would forget once she was back at the diner, dodging impatient customers. But fate had different plans. Later that afternoon, while rushing between her shift at the diner and a babysitting job she picked up for extra cash, Emily nearly collided with a familiar figure outside the corner grocery store. Daniel, she blurted out, almost dropping the bag of apples in her arms. He turned, surprised but smiling. Emily, what are the odds? The truth was, Daniel Hawthorne had arranged his path carefully. He had not stopped thinking about her since last night, and though he would never admit it outright, he had made sure their paths would cross again. I was just picking up some things for my son, he said casually, lifting a small shopping bag. Emily blinked. Your son? Daniel's lips curved in a softer smile. Yes, he is 6 years old. A handful, but the best part of my life. Oh. Something shifted in Emily's chest. The image of this man, tall, calm, quietly confident, suddenly included a little boy, a child who relied on him. It made him feel less like a stranger, and more like someone human, Someone carrying responsibilities she could understand. "That is sweet," she said, her voice gentler. "I babysit sometimes. Kids wear me out, but they are honest. No filters." Daniel chuckled, and for the first time she saw a warmth in him that went beyond charm. "Would you like to meet him?" "Not today, of course, but maybe sometime." The suggestion surprised her. Most men would never mention their child so soon, let alone invite someone new into that part of their life. But he had said it with such ease, without calculation, as if it was natural. Emily hesitated, then smiled. "Maybe. I would like that." A week later, their paths crossed again, this time deliberately. Emily had agreed to join Daniel on a Saturday afternoon at the city park, where he often took his son Jacob. The park buzzed with laughter, children chasing soccer balls, parents calling out reminders to be careful. When Emily spotted Daniel near the swings, her heart skipped. He was kneeling beside a boy with tousled brown hair and bright, curious eyes. Jacob was trying to tie his shoelaces, fumbling with determination. Daniel's hands guided him patiently, his voice low and encouraging. Emily stood there for a moment, unnoticed, watching. Something about the sight hit her harder than expected. It was not the charm of a man on a date. It was the image of a father, present and attentive. "Hi," Emily finally said, stepping closer. Daniel looked up, his expression softening. "Emily, this is Jacob." The boy glanced at her shyly, then offered a small wave. "Hello." She crouched down to his level, smiling. "Nice to meet you, Jacob. Your shoelaces are tricky, huh? I still mess mine up sometimes." He giggled, the sound pure and unguarded. And in that instant, Emily felt the fragile walls around her heart tremble. For the rest of the afternoon, she walked with them through the park, listening as Jacob chattered about dinosaurs and superheroes. She noticed how Daniel never brushed his son off, how he answered every question as though it mattered deeply. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the playground, Emily found herself laughing again, the kind of laughter that made her forget the weight of her bills, her exhaustion, her doubts. But when she returned home that evening, lying awake in her small apartment, her chest tightened. She reminded herself sternly, he was just a man she had mistaken for a blind date. A man completely out of her league. A man with a child, a life, and surely a world that she did not belong to. Still, as she closed her eyes, she could not stop seeing the way Jacob had grabbed his father's hand with complete trust, and the way Daniel's eyes had softened when he looked at her as if, just maybe, she belonged there too. Emily told herself that she would not see him again. It was safer that way. He was kind, yes, and his little boy was sweet. But this was not her world. She was a waitress with overdue bills, and he was a man who carried himself like someone used to having doors open before he even touched them. But fate, once again, had other plans. It was a Thursday evening when she finished a long double shift at the diner. Her feet ached, and her uniform smelled faintly of fried food and coffee. She wanted nothing more than to crawl into bed, but as she stepped outside, pulling her coat tighter against the chill, a familiar car slowed near the curb. She recognized him immediately. Daniel was behind the wheel, and even though the car was a modest black sedan, something about it looked too polished, too well kept. "Emily," he called as he rolled down the window, his voice carrying a calm ease. "Need a ride home?" She hesitated. Accepting rides from men was not something she usually did, but she was too tired to argue, and the bus would take forever. "All right," she said reluctantly, climbing in. The interior was spotless, smelling faintly of leather. She noticed the dashboard, sleek and modern, and the quiet hum of the engine. It was not the car of a struggling single dad. "You did not have to pick me up," she said, folding her arms across her chest. "I was nearby," he answered simply, his eyes focused on the road. "Besides, I do not like the idea of you walking home alone at night." Her heart gave an involuntary flutter, but she forced herself to look away. She could not afford to read into his words. They drove in silence for a while, until a call came through the car's speaker. A man's voice filled the air, formal and respectful. "Yes, sir, the board meeting is confirmed for tomorrow morning. The investors will be there." Emily's head snapped toward him. "Sir? Board meeting? Investors?" Daniel's hand tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "I will call you back," he said curtly, ending the call with a quick tap. The air in the car grew heavier. Emily stared at him, suspicion flaring. Board meeting? Investors? Who exactly are you, Daniel? He did not answer immediately. Instead, he exhaled slowly, as though weighing every word. I run a company. Nothing important. Nothing important? She repeated, her tone sharp. That did not sound like nothing. For the first time since she had met him, he looked unsettled. Emily, can we not talk about this tonight? It is late, and you are tired. Her chest tightened. He was hiding something. She wanted to demand answers, to pull the truth out of him, but part of her was afraid of what she might hear. He pulled up in front of her apartment building. She opened the door quickly, not giving him time to say anything else. Good night, Daniel, she said, her voice clipped. He watched her disappear into the shadows of the stairwell, his jaw tense. Inside her small apartment, Emily sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the sketchbook on her nightstand. She replayed the evening over and over, the polished car, the voice on the phone calling him sir, the way he avoided her questions. It did not add up. He had introduced himself as a single dad on a simple blind date, but the pieces were falling into place in a way that terrified her. For the first time since meeting him, she felt the sharp stab of distance. He was not just a man she had stumbled into. He was something more, someone from a world she had no part in. And yet, deep down, a part of her hoped she was wrong. Because if she was right, then everything between them was built on a lie. The following weekend, Emily was wiping down tables at the diner when her phone buzzed with a flood of notifications. She frowned, slipping it out of her apron pocket. The screen lit up with messages from friends, all saying the same thing. Is this you? Emily, check the news. Confused, she tapped a link. Her breath caught in her throat. There, on a glossy gossip website, was a photograph taken at the park. It was her, laughing beside Daniel, while Jacob tugged at her hand. The headline screamed across the page. Mysterious woman spotted, with reclusive millionaire CEO Daniel Hawthorne. Millionaire, chief executive officer. The words seemed unreal, like something torn from a magazine her customers left behind in the diner booth. Her knees nearly buckled. Emily, are you all right? Her manager asked, but she muttered an excuse and hurried outside. Her phone buzzed again this time. It was Daniel. She almost did not answer, but her trembling fingers betrayed her. Emily, his voice was steady but urgent. I can explain. She laughed bitterly, the sound sharp and broken. Explain what, Daniel? That you let me believe you were just some single dad struggling to get by? That you watched me count quarters for bus fare while you drove away in a luxury car? He was silent for a moment. Then he said softly, I never wanted you to see me as a bank account. I wanted you to see me as a man, as a father. Her chest ached, but the anger was stronger. You lied. Do you know how humiliating this is? My face is plastered on the internet next to a man I barely know. A man who has been lying to me from the very first moment. Emily, please. She ended the call before he could finish, her hand shaking so hard she nearly dropped the phone. That night, she sat in her dimly lit apartment, the glow from her sketchbook lamp casting shadows on the walls. Her pencil hovered above the page, but nothing came. All she could see was the headline. All she could hear was his voice calling her name. Her heart whispered that he had been kind, that he had listened, that his smile when Jacob laughed was not a lie. But her mind roared louder. He had deceived her, and now the whole world was watching. Emily closed the sketchbook, her tears blurring the lines of the unfinished drawing. For the first time in years, she did not feel like the artist who could capture beauty in broken moments. She felt like the broken moment itself. For days, Emily avoided every call that came from Daniel's number. Each time her phone lit up with his name, she pressed decline, her chest tightening with a mix of anger and grief. At the diner, her coworkers whispered, some with curiosity, some with envy, as they passed around the online articles that showed her face next to his. Customers glanced at her as though she were a spectacle rather than a person. The humiliation was unbearable. One evening, after closing her shift, she stepped outside to find someone waiting by the curb. A sleek black car was parked under the flickering streetlight, and beside it stood a woman in a sharp-tailored coat. Her hair was perfectly styled, her heels clicking against the pavement as she approached Emily with a cool smile. You must be Emily, the woman said smoothly. I am Victoria, Daniel's former fiancé. The words hit like ice. Emily froze, her hand tightening around the strap of her bag. Why are you here? Victoria tilted her head, her smile widening without warmth. Because you should know the truth. Men like Daniel do not choose women like you. Whatever fantasy you think you are living, it will not last. He belongs in boardrooms and mansions, not dingy diners. You are a temporary distraction, nothing more. Emily's stomach twisted. She wanted to argue, to shout, but the woman's words pierced the very insecurities she had been trying to ignore. Victoria stepped closer, her voice lowering. Do yourself a favor. Walk away before you get hurt. You will not survive in his world. I know, because I did not. With that, she turned sharply and slipped back into the waiting car, leaving Emily rooted to the sidewalk, trembling. That night, Emily sat on her bed with her sketchbook open, but her hands refused to move. Her mind echoed with Victoria's voice, with the headlines, with Daniel's unanswered explanations. The fragile hope she had once held for something real between them now felt crushed under the weight of lies and expectations. For the first time since she was a teenager, Emily allowed herself to cry without restraint. She cried for her exhaustion, for the dream of art she had buried, and for the foolish heart that had dared to believe a mistake in a coffee shop could ever turn into something lasting. She whispered into the silence of her room, I will not be anyone's mistake again. And with that, she closed her sketchbook, hiding away not only her drawings but the fragile pieces of her heart. The following week was a blur of long shifts and heavy silences. Emily kept her head down at the diner, forcing herself to smile at customers even when she wanted to crumble. She told herself she was moving on, that she was stronger without him. Yet every time she caught her reflection in the cafe window, she remembered his eyes, steady and unshaken. The way he had looked at her drawings as though they were priceless. Daniel, however, refused to disappear quietly. One rainy evening, as Emily hurried home with a paper bag of groceries, she found him waiting outside her apartment building. His hair was damp, his coat dusted with rain, but his presence was unyielding. Emily, he said softly, his voice carrying exhaustion and determination, please, just give me 5 minutes. She stopped several feet away, her chest rising and falling. Why are you here? Have you not humiliated me enough? I never wanted you humiliated, he said quickly. I wanted to protect you. I kept my life hidden because I did not want you to think I was only offering you money or status. I wanted you to see me for who I am. Her voice trembled with anger. And what are you, Daniel? Because to me, you are a stranger who lied. You let me sit across from you and pour out my life while you built walls around yours. Daniel's shoulders tightened, but he did not back away. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a worn sketchbook. Her sketchbook, Emily's breath caught. Where did you? You left it at the park, he said, his voice low. I kept it safe because I knew it mattered. And Emily, it is extraordinary. The way you see the world, the way you capture people in their most ordinary moments, it is a gift. You deserve to be seen, even when you do not believe it yourself. Her throat ached with unshed tears. Do not say things like that. It makes it harder to hate you. He stepped closer, holding out the sketchbook. Then do not hate me. Let me prove that I am more than a headline. Let me show you I am not afraid to choose you over all of it, the business, the expectations, even the people who think you are not enough. Emily shook her head, her grip tightening on the grocery bag. You do not understand. People like Victoria were right. I do not belong in your world. Daniel's jaw clenched. Then I will not ask you to enter my world. I will enter yours. If it means eating late-night diner pie, if it means walking instead of driving, if it means watching you sketch until sunrise, I will be there. Not because I pity you, but because I need you. For a long moment, the only sound was the rain dripping from the awning above them. Emily looked at him, at the man who could command boardrooms, yet stood dripping on a broken sidewalk, asking for nothing but her trust. Slowly, she reached for the sketchbook. Her fingers brushed his as she took it back, and the contact sent a jolt through her chest. Go home, Daniel, she whispered, though her voice had softened. If you really mean what you say, then prove it. Not with money, with time, with action. He nodded once, firmly. I will. As she disappeared into her apartment, Daniel remained on the sidewalk, soaked through but resolute. For the first time in years, he was not thinking about profit margins or investor meetings. He was thinking only of Emily Carter, the woman who had mistaken him for a $5 date and ended up becoming the one person he could not afford to lose. 2 weeks passed, and Emily tried to convince herself that Daniel's promises were just words meant to soften her heart. Yet, every evening, he showed up. Sometimes he would sit at the diner counter like any other customer, eating pie and coffee while she worked. Sometimes he would walk her home in silence, holding an umbrella above her head when the rain poured. He never pushed, never demanded, only waited with a quiet patience that began to wear down the walls she had built. But the real test came when the world intruded again. One morning, as Emily was leaving her apartment, she noticed a group of reporters gathered on the corner. Cameras flashed as soon as she stepped outside. Voices called her name, demanding answers. "Are you dating Daniel Hawthorne? What do you have to say to his investors? Do you think you can fit into his lifestyle?" Her face burned with panic. She turned back toward the stairwell, but suddenly Daniel was there, striding toward her with Jacob's small hand in his. His expression was calm, but his eyes burned with resolve. He stopped in front of the cameras, placing himself between Emily and the chaos. "Listen carefully," he said, his voice carrying authority. "Emily Carter is not a scandal. She is not a distraction. She is the woman I love. And if anyone wants to question that, they can question me directly." Gasps rippled through the reporters. Flashbulbs popped in rapid bursts. Emily's heart thundered in her chest. She had not expected this, had not expected him to throw himself into the storm so publicly, so fearlessly. He turned to her then, his gaze softening in a way that made her knees weak. "Emily, I am done hiding. I choose you, not because it is easy, but because it is the truth, and I will keep choosing you for as long as you let me." The cameras kept flashing, voices kept shouting, but all she could hear was the steadiness in his words. She felt Jacob's small hand slip into hers, warm and trusting. For the first time since the mistake in that coffee shop, Emily let herself believe that maybe this was not a mistake at all. Maybe this was fate. She squeezed Jacob's hand, then looked at Daniel, her voice barely above a whisper but strong enough to be heard. "Then I choose you too." The chaos around them swelled, but in that moment, it no longer mattered. All that mattered was the man who had stepped out of his world to stand in hers, and the choice she had finally made to stand with him. A month later, life had not magically turned into a fairy tale, but it had settled into something real, something steady. Emily still worked shifts at the diner, though now she did not feel invisible behind the counter. Customers smiled at her differently, not because of the headlines, but because she smiled back with a quiet strength she had not carried before. Daniel did not sweep her away into a mansion or surround her with luxury. Instead, he showed up in the simplest ways. He waited for her after work, sometimes with Jacob bouncing excitedly at his side. He brought her coffee on mornings when she had barely slept. He listened when she spoke of dreams she had buried and encouraged her to bring them back to life. One evening, he surprised her by taking her to the very same cafe where their story had begun. The chalkboard menu still listed overpriced muffins, and the same corner table by the window sat waiting. Emily laughed softly as they sat down. "I cannot believe this is where it all started. A blind date that was not even mine." Daniel reached into his wallet and pulled out a crumpled $5 bill, setting it gently on the table between them. "This was supposed to buy me one cheap coffee and a forgettable evening. Instead, it gave me you, the best mistake of my life." Her eyes filled with tears, not of sadness but of something fuller, something she had almost given up on hope. Jacob came running over from the counter, carrying a muffin nearly as big as his hands. "Daddy says this is a celebration," he announced proudly. Emily reached out, steadying the muffin before it toppled. She glanced at Daniel, who met her gaze with unwavering certainty. For a long moment, time seemed to pause. The noise of the cafe faded, the bustle of the city outside blurred, and all that remained was the man who had chosen her, the child who had accepted her, and the fragile but powerful truth that love was never about wealth or status. It was about showing up, about standing firm, about being real when the world wanted you to pretend. Emily placed her hand over Daniel's, her voice steady and full. "Then let us never forget that one mistake can lead to the right forever." And for the first time in years, she did not feel like she was fighting alone. She felt like she was home, The mistake that had begun with a $5 blind date had turned into a story of love, justice, and a family built not on money, but on truth.